Dear friends, good evening. Thank you for joining us to our first chamber lecture series. Tonight we have in store a very interesting lecture, and this is titled The Ray of Creation. This is one of two key lectures so that we can have a deep understanding on the tree of life. For the scope of tonight's lecture, we will look at the tree of life by its major components. And later on, we're going to come together once again to discreetly observe and understand each one of the 10 spheres that make up the tree of the Sephiroth. So tonight, this is the ray of creation. And we cannot even start to talk about the ray of creation if we do not make a reference to the writings on creation from the sacred scriptures. So for our purposes, we are going to take the core writings from the Christian Bible, and we are going to complement with fragments from the Bhagavad Gita, from the Sefer Yetzirah, and we could get others, but we only have 1 hour. So we're going to give you as much condensed content as we can for this one. So starting in the book of Genesis, this book of Genesis written by the great master Moses, we start right there in chapter 1, verse 1, and it says, "In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, Let there be light, and there was light." Not too long ago, we came across a friend as we were listening to a conversation on creation, and they very interestingly said, you start reading the book of Genesis, and it starts by saying that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and that the earth was without form, and that the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, but there is no indication of when the waters were created. And I think that that is one of the most beautiful statements that anyone could ever make, because it takes a little for us to see what is actually happening within this very condensed version of everything that happened in creation. So let's start by segmenting some of these words, because we know that gnosis is trapped within the etymology. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And in the true meaning of the word earth, in that original meaning, it comes from Gaia. And Gaia means not water. So what are these waters? What is this? Well, what we are seeing here in this very first fragment of the book of Genesis is that Moses is speaking about the first order of worlds. Proto is first, cosmos is order of worlds. So protocosmos is the very first order of worlds. What is that? Well, that exists beyond any image that we may have already conceived about this thing called God. In the protocosmos, what we find is unmanifested light. What we have is uncreated space. And we have a fusion of those two that, as they come together, it enables the awakening of the cosmic day, and it leads to a ray of creation that is called the Holy Okidanok. In other words, this Holy Okidanok is also known as the Ein Sof Or, the Ein Sof Or. In the protocosmos, we find all of the transcendental spiritual suns that shine with infinite splendors. Here we find radiant spheres that our astronomers will never be able to perceive through their telescopes. One time, a student said, "What do you mean? How can they be radiant and our astronomers never be able to perceive them through their telescopes?" And I guess that a good way to be able to answer that would be at looking at the quality of images that we used to get from the Hubble telescope and the quality of images that we're getting from the James Webb telescope. The Hubble telescope gave us images that were astonishing, that were mesmerizing, jaw-dropping. But the moment the James Webb telescope comes in and starts expanding on the use of the infrared, wow, The different things that show up is simply amazing. And when we start looking throughout different areas of the spectrum, we will come to continue discovering things that were not perceptible before. But as of now, these radiant spheres, Samael very clearly says they will never be able to perceive them with their telescopes. As part of this first segment of creation, there are three specific forces that are present. These are Aleph, Mem, and Shin. Yes, these are Hebrew characters, but these Hebrew characters, they have many more meanings than just a plain conversion to a Latin alphabet letter with a counterpart in the Hebrew alphabet. No, it has way more than that. Aleph is the breath of life. It is the great law. Aleph is the source of all the universes, the source of all of the cosmoses, of all men and of all gods. Then we have Mem, and Mem is water. And this water exists in the heavens above. There is a division that we will see that takes place where the waters from above are separated from the waters of below. Somebody asked, what separates them? Well, we will see that in a second. And then there is Shem, and Shem is fire. Notice that Shem, as a Hebrew character, it is similar to a trident. And here we see the number 3 and the 3 primary forces. We say that these are the 3 primary forces of the first moment, because here we find fire, water, and spirit. Here we find the salt, the sulfur, and the mercury. Here we have the azoe of the ancient alchemists. Here we find the arche. So between water and fire and spirit, because we have already discussed this great mystery in this great level of intermediate level studies, we know that there is a sacred mantra that is used during the practice of the super dynamic of love. We know that it is I, A, O. The fire, the water, and the spirit. Notice how clearly they appear. We find them written in the Sefer Yetzirah. Sefer Yetzirah is part of the Zohar, part of the spirit of the teaching in the Hebrew tradition. It says 3 mothers, Aleph, Mem, and Shin. A great and marvelous secret is hidden and sealed within 6 rings, and from them emanate air, water, and fire. They have given birth to the fathers, and the fathers have given birth to the engendered. So from these 3 initial forces, we see the birth of the fathers. Those are all of the gods. And then we go into verse number 6. It says, and God said, let's remember that the Christian tradition refers to God, many different manifestations of God with this generic term, G-O-D, God. We know that there is more than that. But for the sake of our conversation tonight, let's move on. And God said, let there be firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters, the aether, from the waters, the shamayim. And God made the firmament and divided the waters under the firmament from those above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. Wow, these 3 verses are so beautiful, because it is separating the waters of life from the waters of creation. Those waters of creation are the ether. We have heard about Akash. We know that there are 7 distinct tattvas that are vibrations of the ether. In many of the lectures, we have speaking about Prithvi, Apas, Vayu, Tehas. We have spoken about Akash, which is the vibration of ether. And we have spoken about Adi and Samadhi, the astral light and the cosmic mind, the 7 elements, everything that manifests from within the ether. But then there are the waters from above, and those waters from above are the pure Akash. From there, we see those condensations that result in the ether, and from the ether, we see everything else that is used as an element to emerge. And notice that it says firmament. Firmament comes from firmus, that means unmovable. That means that within the ray of creation, there is an immutable aspect in all of creation that creates this clear distinction between all of creation and the source of creation itself. And then we see that God called this heaven. It comes from Latin celum, and this is a region that has been cut or chiseled in concentric circles. So whenever we're thinking about the tree of life, I don't want you to think that you're jumping from one sphere into the next one. What is actually happening is that there is an expansion of consciousness within these concentric spheres. Concentric means that these are all spheres that are one inside the other, and they all share a common center. So there is a source of expansion through each one of these spheres in the tree of life, and the greater the expansion of the consciousness, the greater the perception becomes and manifests in higher realms of creation. So here we find those key words: firmament from firmus and heaven from celum. Notice where this exists. At the very top of the tree of life, where we have the protocosmos, the first order of worlds, what we have is the uncreated light, the unmanifested space. From the union of those two, we see the emergence of the ray of creation. We see the awakening, the period of activity, the Manvantara. Up there, we see these waters from above. Those waters from above are Darakash. This is why in the Buddhist tradition, there is a beautiful goddess of name Akashagarbha. And she is seen navigating, standing in contemplation on a fish. And the fish is swimming on an ocean of fire. To separate those waters from above, we have this firmament, this thing that is unmovable. And here in the firmament, what we see is the highest triangle of the tree of life. Yes, you can see that they are kind of offset. You can see that in the screen. Well, we are not very specific, putting the upper triangle right there in the firmament. But let us tell you this. For us to know if everything has to fall on a specific space here, we would have had to be there. We have not developed that ability yet. But what we do know is that there are degrees of access. We know that there are grades within grades of development that will give us the ability to perceive. And when we say give us, give those sincere practitioners that reach those highest realms of creation, those who have truly embraced the Buddhist annihilation. And those who become Paramartasatyas, those who receive the greatest of wisdom, those can escape that 10th chamber, that 10th heaven, Keter, and walk through the 11th door of the Ain Sof Aur. Below the firmament, we see everything else. Notice that we're seeing the waters from below. Now we start at the very top. Protocosmos. Here is where we find the first order of worlds. And notice that we're writing ether with an A, because this is like the absolute abstract unmanifested ether. It is that ocean of fire. And from that creation, we see the condensation of the AYOCOSMOS. The AYOCOSMOS is the realm of the archetypes. It is here where we find the forces of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. This is the firmament, the unmovable aspect of all of these concentric circles. This is that highest realm. This is that space where the Sefer Yetzirah states the realm of the fathers who have given birth to the engendered. And here we find the waters, these waters that are Shamayim, Shim and Mem, fire and water. What makes the AYOCOSMOS? What? Because we heard already that the protocosmos is made of all of these splendors of suns that our instruments will never be able to detect. But the AYOCOSMOS, these are the millions of suns and planets that are traveling throughout the infinite space. So our sun, that is one sun of the hundreds of millions of suns that exist in the galaxy, as it travels to space, our sun is part of this AYOCOSMOS. The billions and trillions of worlds and stars that populate the endless space make part of the AYOCOSMOS. All of the galaxies together make part of the AYOCOSMOS. So this is a very specific manifestation of creation. And you can see that, of course, as expected, it is all-encompassing. But let's go back to the book of Genesis. And it says, "And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas, and God saw that it was good." So by now, the reader has reached verse number 10 on the first chapter. And in their mind, without having this expanded cultural foundation, what they would have seen was there's a firmament, yes, I imagine it blue with white clouds. Water above, yes, that must be the clouds. And then the water from below, that must be the seas, the oceans, rivers, and lakes. That is what they must have thought. But we know that it goes way beyond that. Here, notice that we find the word earth again. We already know that earth is just Gaia. It is not water. But now we see this thing called seas. And seas, well, there's really not much behind that. Seas comes from mar, and mare means a mass of water. We know that we need of water anywhere where there is creation. We need of water anywhere where there is a manifestation of life. Of course, we cannot just think that water has to be in liquid form. Because yes, it exists here in liquid form because we have specific environmental conditions that lead to water to express itself as a liquid. But we know that water can express itself as solid. We know that water can express itself as a vapor. We know that water could be supercritical with properties of water, of liquid, and vapor and gas. So depending on where we are, water will be there as an element of creation. We may just not be able to perceive it immediately. And on top of that, well, it may exist, but it may not exist at the concentration, at the quantities that we perceive it here in this planet Earth. So when we're looking now at this tree of life and the flow of the ray of creation, well, we know that we start in the absolute. Uncreated light, unmanifested space. There is a fusion of them together. A period of activity emerges. We see the emergence of the cosmic day. Then we see that there is an unmovable firmament. And from there, we find the earth and the seas. In the unmovable firmament, we already learned that what we have is the realm of the archetypes. All of these gods that exist. But below that, notice that we have two additional triangles in the tree of life. We have a realm of creation. This is what we find, the innermost, with its human and its spiritual soul. And below that, we have the realm of formation. The triangle of the innermost is a triangle of ethics. It has to be of ethics because the innermost follows directly the will of the Glorian, of the real being, of the Father. And then we see a triangle of magic, nature magic or natural magic. Well, we can see that there is influence that can be done into the forces of nature. And that the moment that that influence is made, well, we see that there are effects that manifest. And below these two triangles, there is a fallen spheres. And that fallen sphere is a plane of substance. It is known as Asia. These two triangles and this fallen sphere add up to this thing called the earth and the seas. So here we find the not water and the mass of water. Here we find Prakriti, our divine mother. We find her third aspect, her third manifestation, and all of her creations. But let's go back into the book of Genesis. And it says, and God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after its kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. So notice that by the time that we get to this verse 16, we have seen a manifestation of let there be light. We know that once creation starts, duality immediately starts manifesting. There is no light without darkness. So in that realm of the AYOCOSMOS, we see all of those gods of light, and we see all of their shadows as well, because there has to be a balance in nature, and whether it is light or shadow, everything is within the containment of the all. Nothing can exist outside of the all. It has been written by the Kabbalistic, by the Hermetic tradition. If anything were to exist outside of the all, it would be just as great or greater than the all itself, and that would be impossible. So let there be light. Yes, the AYOCOSMOS, the gods and all of their shadows. We see those archangels, we see those creatures, masters of darkness in the underworld also manifesting. And here, now we are speaking about the creation of two lights, one to rule the day and one to rule the night. But some key words here of our interest are herb, yielding seed. Herb is a non-woody plant. And here we see seed, which comes from the root word seminis, semen, seeds. These herbs, these non-woody plants, this is referring to all of those aspects of creation in which the monads, the souls, are going from one kingdom unto the next in their evolution, in their development. So this includes the mineral, the plant, and the animal kingdom. And yes, they are yielding seed, because within them, the sun has bestowed all of those solar seeds that are necessary for their development and for their expansion. But then there is the fruit tree that yields fruit. We're speaking here of a tree that is woody in nature. This is the representation of the tree of life. And we will see that the tree of life expresses itself at different levels of creation. And within us as men, we know that men is an epicene noun that means both men and women. We have already clarified that. But us as a microcosmic man, we know that man in its origin means demigod. It is a hero. It is a creature in a human form with powers that are divine, that correspond to the gods. That is the true definition of man. Samael just keeps it simple because many people would have otherwise been scandalized. So here we see those realms where we have those monads evolving, and we see this humanoid kingdom where, of course, we see fruit trees yielding fruit after the kind. We know that later on in the scriptures, it says that you'll recognize the tree by the fruit that they provide. And that is used as a parable to understand those who can internalize and apply the teachings and those who just don't. Okay? All right. So here we see the earth and the seas that are existing within the AYOCOSMOS. Everything exists within this greater order of worlds. And immediately below this triangle, we find the macrocosmos. Notice that the macrocosmos is this second triangle. This is the realm of the innermost. If you ever heard someone say that our being is a citizen of the galaxy, well, that is not totally an incorrect statement. This is the macrocosmos. And if our being is a citizen of the galaxy, and we know that at least physically, to cross the galaxy from one side to the other, we would need 100,000 light years or more than that. We know that we're speaking about a massive expanse. So we can imagine only the majesty, the power, the presence of the innermost, how intense it is. Our innermost cannot just show up here because it has so much power and intensity that it's no telling what would happen with all of this creation. So the innermost then has to send out a fraction of its human soul. Just a little spark. That little spark is right there at the very center of this tree of life. Right there in that sphere of the center is called Tiferet, which means beauty. And it takes a fraction of that human soul and allows that human soul to descend. And it goes through the Deuterocosmos. The Deuterocosmos is the solar system. Here, at this point in the tree of life, we're speaking about the mental plane. In Tiferet, we're speaking about a plane of causation. There is no time. The past, the present, and the future unify themselves in an eternal now. But then it descends into the realm of the mind. We see here the manifestation of the solar system. From there, we see the condensation of the mesocosmos. The mesocosmos, now that the ray is descending, well, if the solar system is the second order of worlds, Deuterocosmos, now we see that the planets of the solar systems make up the mesocosmos. This is the order of worlds in which everything equilibrates, everything harmonizes, everything is brought into equilibrium. And now let's go back into the writings of the book of Genesis. By the time we get to verse 27, it reads, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, God created him. Male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth." Now this is a beautiful statement, because some people have gotten to this point in chapter 1, and they say, the creation of man. He created them male and female. And that is incorrect. God created them individually, both male and female. They were perfect androgens. They were a perfect balance between masculine and feminine forces within the same constitution. That is completely different than one man here, one woman there. And he is creating them in his likeness and his image. And you see this everywhere. You look at the beautiful images of Lord Shiva. And Shiva has a face that is beautiful like that of a woman. But he is shown with a very thick mustache. That way, you can see the balance between a masculine and a feminine principle. You see Archangel Michael, corpulent, muscular, commanding. But you also see his face, and his face is that of a woman. Because we have to show the perfect balance between a masculine and a feminine principle. So what God is speaking here is about the creation of the true man, of the heroes, of those with human form, with qualities and powers of gods. And this is why God said, replenish the earth, subdue it, become a king or queen of creation. But those in the darker circles, they have taken this verse number 28 and they have tweaked it to their own desires. Because it says here, God said, well, be fruitful and multiply. And they use that statement to tell their followers, go and enjoy sexuality. Enjoy it. Any way you want, just be fruitful and multiply. But notice that it doesn't say here, be fruitful, multiply, and fornicate. It does not say that. It is asking of them to continue populating the earth, but to do it through the teachings, through the methods of Kriya Shakti. Remember that Shakti is Aima, she is the mother. Ava, the father, is Shiva. So Shiva Shakti, Ava, and Aima, as the father-mother figure, well, in that image that everyone else has created, they were asked to transmute that creative energy to allow themselves to reproduce in a way that is superior, not to go out and indulge of sensations. Just so that you know, it is in chapter number 2, verse number 7, where it speaks about the separation of the sexes. You remember this from our lecture in the 7 races when we spoke about the Lemurian race, specific to the third sub-race of the Lemurian race. And this is what chapter 2, verse 7 is speaking of later on in that creation, where it says that God formed man from the dust of the ground. That means that he gave him form from substance, from this realm of Asya. And he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Later on, he pulls out a rib. That has another connotation. We're not going to get there tonight. But so far, we have gotten to chapter 1, verse 28. And it clearly states that this man is created at the likeness and the image of God. What we see here is the microcosmos. Micro means that it is an order of worlds identical to the greater realms, but infinitely different in degree. This microcosmos is made of the last 2 spheres of the tree of life. We have at the very bottom, Malkut, where we find substance as we perceive it today. And then immediately above it, we have the ethereal plane. That is a sphere of Yesod. We cannot exist here without that ethereal plane, because our bodies would not be functional if we did not have an ethereal body responsible for how is it that we deal with light, how is it that we assimilate, how is it that we think. But also, how is it that our biological and our chemical processes in the body are then regulated. And below this, well, we find the third order of worlds. This is the Tritocosmos. And what we find here is those realms of shadows. In the beginning, God created light. And the moment that happens, there has to be darkness. So, of course, they are both like in nature, infinitely different in degree. And in the Tritocosmos, we find the submerged mineral kingdom. Those are the spheres of hell that we have discussed for the last 6 weeks, as we have looked into the works of Dante Alighieri. We find here the atomic infernos, but we also have here our unconsciousness, our subconsciousness, our infraconsciousness. We have access to all of that, and we need to learn how to go in and mine so that we can get the right wisdom from those realms. So let's go back to the top, and let's make sure that we get what it means when it comes to the flow of the ray of creation. We start at the protocosmos, first order of worlds. No mechanical principles. This is ineffable and infinitely divine. Uncreated light, abstract space. This is all governed by the one law, by the all. Then we descend into the AYOCOSMOS. This right here is governed by 3 primary principles that regulate and direct the creation of the cosmos. By now everyone says, yes, Rick, I know, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. But wait, now that we are here in the first chamber, let's expand on what this number 3 means. Because we have heard about the law of Triamashikamno many times. But maybe you have not heard this. And we're going to share with you some good teaching that comes from the Emerald Tables of Thoth the Atlantean. Thoth the Atlantean is Hermes Trismegistus. This is the thrice great god Ibis of Thoth in Egypt. And specific to the number 3, In his tablets, he says this: three is the mystery, comes from the great one, from the protocosmos. Listen, and light will dawn on you. He says, in the primeval dwell three unities. Other than these, none can exist. These are the equilibrium, source of creation, one God, one truth, one point of freedom. There is a three right there. God, truth, freedom. Three come forth from the three of the balance. All life, all good, all power. This is what comes from those three. It says, three are the qualities of God in his light home: infinite power, infinite wisdom, infinite love. Three are the powers given to the masters to transmute evil, to assist good, to use discrimination. Three are the things inevitable for God to perform: manifest power, manifest wisdom, manifest love. That's another three. It says, three are the powers creating all things: divine love, possessed of perfect knowledge; divine wisdom, knowing all possible means; divine power, possessed by the joint will of divine love and divine wisdom. Hermes continues by saying, three are the circles, states of existence: the circle of light, where dwells nothing but God, and only God can traverse it; the circle of chaos, where all things by nature arise from death; and the circle of awareness, where all things spring from life. Wow. Hermes continues and he says, all things animate are of three states of existence: chaos or death, or death, liberty and humanity, and felicity of heaven. Three necessities control all things, beginning in the great deep, the circle of chaos, and plenitude in heaven. And three are the paths of the soul: man, liberty, and light. There is a last thing that Hermes says, and he says, three are the hindrances: lack of endeavor to obtain knowledge, non-attachment to God, attachment to evil. That comes from the emerald tables of the great Thoth the Atlantean. And this is an expansion on what is that this divine law of three actually means. And we find this three in this greater order of worlds, in the AYOCOSMOS. But then we go into the macrocosmos, and we know that this is a galaxy. The AYOCOSMOS is governed by three principles. The macrocosmos is governed by 6 laws. And this is the realm of the innermost. Here we find Atman, Buddhi, and Manas. Below that, we get then to every solar system, regardless of the galaxy to which it belongs to, whether it is a world of matter or antimatter, doesn't matter. All of those solar systems are the deuterocosmos. These are the second order of worlds, and they are governed by 12 laws. We continue descending into the MESOCOSMOS. Here is where everything takes balance. This is where everything reaches harmony. This is any planet roaming around a sun. Whether the planet is of matter or antimatter, it does not matter. Whether it is here or it is a planet in a solar system in another of the stars of the Pleiades or in another galaxy, that is still a mesocosmos, and it is governed by 24 laws. And within the planet, think of heavens as concentric circles. So within the planet, we find the microcosmos. Any human organism, whether here or anywhere else, always governed by 48 laws. And below this, Then we get into the third order of worlds. These are the realms of those shadows. This is the Trito or the Tritocosmos. The abyss is governed by 96 laws. And as we have already learned, as we go from one sphere into the next one, as we continue going deeper and deeper and deeper into these realms of creation, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn, Neptune, all of these spheres, those laws continue to multiply. 96 laws in the sphere of the moon, 192 laws in the sphere of Mercury, and then times 3, times 4, times 5, till we got down to the ninth sphere that is governed by 864 laws. Where right there, everything stops. The distance from the absolute is so tremendous that only the forces of nature actuate within those realms, but of course, serving the purpose of the all, because nothing exists outside of the all. And now that we see where all these realms are, now that we can see where we are a microcosmic representation in all this creation, standing here, governed by 48 laws, in a mesocosmos that if we expand, we are able immediately to enjoy of its 24 laws. That tells us many things. It tells us that as we break with many of these mechanical laws, we can expand into a space right here within our very own planet where we can enjoy of so much more freedom, so much more liberty. We can start expanding from a condition of humanoid to man, to liberty, to light. Where we can take our body and clearly move through the airs of mystery. Levitate as the great St. Francis of Assisi used to do. Put our body in Jinn state and go anywhere in the planet where we need to go. And we are all given 108 lives to do so. We continue going through these cycles of life. And sometimes where the law of accidents, that is mainly pushed by our own indiscretions, well, it will create problems for us. It will inhibit our ability to continue moving forward. It could damage our body in one way or another. If we remain bound to the law of the pendulum, we will continue going to and fro with its swings. So we need to make something out of these 108 lives. Because certainly there is clearly more than just what our 5 senses of the human machine can perceive. We have to learn to take these teachings from the great masters. But for as long as we continue projecting our own insufficiencies, for as long as we continue projecting our defects and our shortcomings into the great ones, well, we're not going to make any progress. After all, every time that a great master comes, we continue abusing of them. We poison them, we throw them in jail, we kill them, we crucify them, we do all these things. We have to learn to start seeing gnosis as the thing that enables us to make progress in this life that is in reality a path of initiation. If life is the path to initiation, gnosis is the tools, the doctrine, the practices, the means for us to be able to continue moving from one step to the next one, following the direction of the innermost. And as we do that, we disconnect from the law of accidents and we start moving into the law of fate. Fate, because it is directed by the innermost. It takes us every time into a superior level of being. It empowers the innermost to make use of its parlock duty. It gives us an opportunity to take all of our bodmin caldenos, all of those values that are deposited in all of our cylinders, and maximize them. It gives the opportunity to the internal Savior to manifest itself, to make use of our creative power and multiply its capacity by getting rid of everything that is just an aggregate. The moment that we decide to make something with these 108 lives and embrace the teachings of the masters, and embrace applying the teachings of the masters even at our most darkest hour, it is then and there that we're going to be heading back into that realm of paradise through that very narrow door. This is where we must start heading ourselves to. As Christ incarnates in these great masters, he always gives us the same message. Krishna speaks to Arjuna, and he says, of 1,000 men, maybe one may strive for perfection. Among those who try, maybe one will become perfect. And among those who become perfect, maybe one will perfectly know me. So we know that this is a path that requires patience, that it requires sacrifice, that it requires of us to use good discernment. Good discernment, because we need to learn to separate what is the real fruit, where is the real seed, and where is everything else. Samael says, but how do we let people know that they are mistaken? Whenever people are fooled by falsifiers of metals, whenever people are fooled by those who are those heretics who create schism and separate the groups, and they interpret things at their own convenience. No, how do we let people know that they are mistaken? How do we let them understand that the path to hell is paved with good intentions? No one believes their sect to be incorrect. Everyone is convinced by the words of the blind. Samael says, if devotees were truly conscious of the Christic gospel taught by the great Master Jesus, there would only be one universal Christic religion. But believers cannot come to an agreement because their consciousness is asleep. And let me tell you this. This is why Gnosis is not a religion. Gnosis is the root wisdom from where all of the religions emerge. And that is very different. Gnosis is not a religion. But in Gnosis, you find practices, didactic teachings, exercises, methods, that when you start applying them, you can then clearly determine what is the map that you need to follow in life and what is not. And that is what makes Gnosis different. Samael clearly says, don't follow me. I'm here just putting the signposts. This is what he says. I'm here just setting signposts. You have to follow that will of your innermost. Don't follow me. And of course, on us, the instructors of the ICQ, or the instructors anywhere else, much less you should follow. Most likely we are in a worse condition than many of you may be. So we are here just to take these teachings, to put them into practice. Because Samael says, at some point you have to determine if this is the map that you want to follow or not. So, believers cannot come to an agreement because their consciousness is asleep. Yes. There are many churches that have been founded on whatever verse somebody picked. No. We're speaking here that Gnosis is indeed the universal Christic didactic. This is the universal Christic religion in terms of religare, because it will reunite you. To which extent? That all depends on the innermost, on your innermost. To which extent? That all depends on how much you are willing to put into it. Somebody also says, because their consciousness is asleep, they don't know. They walk because others walk. They eat because others eat. They say what others say. And so they walk from cradle to grave. And they walk blind. Remember the words of Hermes. There are three paths of the soul. Man's the first path. Liberty is the second one. Light is the third one. And these are not just forks on the road. These are stages of development of the soul itself. Friends, only through the death of the ego, the awakening of the consciousness becomes possible. And the awakening of the consciousness is not a thing that happens overnight. By now, at this level of study, it would be very real to you that the awakening of the consciousness is the summation of all of those ever expansive experiences that go through your consciousness. And we know that if we do not take advantage of these 108 lives, well, once that count is done, we will have to descend into the realms of hell, allow those forces of nature to destroy everything that we have chosen to not deal with right now, and eventually, after some 8 or 10,000 years, perhaps emerge out the other side and once again start our development in the mineral kingdom. We know that the path of evolution is mineral, plant, animal, to eventually reach a human form. Anything between 10 and 100,000 years to once again have a human body. And once we have completed those cycles 3,000 times, if there has not been any development, well then, you're done. You're done. At that moment, that monad is going to return back into the bosom of the Absolute. And yes, it goes back into a realm of one law, of infinite happiness, of undefinable, expansive liberty. Yes, that is true. But it goes back there without any mastery. It goes back there as a simple elemental. And then it would have to wait until the next cosmic day. And we know that we're speaking here in terms of greater than 300 million years if it's going from one stage of one Manu to the next. And if we're speaking about a Mahamambantara, we're speaking of about 4 trillion years. In the big expanse of things, we shouldn't even worry about time. But what we should worry is about what we do with what we have been given now. To realize the privileged situation in which we're finding ourselves. And to exercise a higher degree of responsibility and just simply put things into practice. Friends, we took this material from a lecture that was given by Master Samael Aun titled The Seven Cosmos. And as always, we are super grateful to all these sources because thanks to them we were able to put this material together. So dear friends, this has been the lecture, The Ray of Creation. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening, and may all beings be happy.